This is the Sports Pod Time Machine. Welcome inside the machine, everybody. We're flying through time, looking at the classic games, moments, and events in sports history, and trying to answer all the timeless discussions and debates that make sports great. Today, we're going into the future. The year is 2040. The President of the United States is President Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. But what will sports look like in 2040? Will baseball still be our national pastime? Will we even care about baseball anymore? Will we still be football obsessed? The NBA, the NHL, soccer. What will the sports landscape look like 20 years from now? Lucky for you, because you're listening to this podcast, you're going to find out 20 years before everybody else. We have the answers as usual. At least I have the answers. I don't know about these two guys. But as always, I'm joined by Richie Hero and by Big Pete, the Moose. I'm the Greek. Fellas, how we doing? What's going on?
Not much. What's going on, Greek?
Yeah, we're good, man. We're good. So let's just we're going to get right to it. We'll start with you, Richie. We're in 2040. We're 20 years in the future. And this is a discussion you and I have had it. I've had it with Pete. It's a discussion I've had with a lot of sports fans. And especially with the direction that baseball's going, that football's going right now, we kind of talk about what the sports landscape will look like in a couple of years. So we're going 20 years into the future. Right, we're in the time machine. We're going 20 years into the future. What will the sports landscape look like? Richie, go ahead, rank them for me. Let's start that way. Let's simplify it into that. If you have to rank our major sports, or maybe throw one in there that we wouldn't even expect. If you had to rank the popularity of the sports 20 years from now, what is it going to look like?
Before we get to that, I got to ask you, what is the popularity? Like, how are we determining popularity? Is it TV ratings? Is it attendance?
Let's do a mix. It's a mix of everything, because I don't think you can just look at any one thing in a vacuum. So if we're going to put that's a good point, because there's one of these sports that in my mind I think will still have a tremendous TV rating, but maybe fading out of popularity in the other categories. So let's just look at in totality. We're combine, what people are playing with what people are interested in, with going to these games, with the television ratings. Yeah. Go ahead. Give me your 5 or your 6, whatever.
So I won't give too much reasonings for it. I'm just going to give you the sports in order of what they're going to be in 2040. I advise the listeners, after I am done, to turn off the pod machine for around 5 or 6 minutes and then come back, because you're going to hear some pretty bad opinions by the other two. But We'll start off with football number 1, because football is king. We all know this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go with basketball, the NBA, number 2. We're going to go with Major League Baseball, number 3. Now we're going to go, this one's a little hard. I'm going to go with soccer, number 4. I'm going to go with hockey, 5. I'm going to add 2 sports to the mix that I think are going to be really, really big. And that is MMA and then NASCAR. So, and if you wanted to push the NHL behind those 2, I wouldn't really put up much of an argument. That's my 6.
All right. Well, whatever. We'll tell you why you're wrong in a few minutes. But Pete, let's go to you, man. Pete, Richie's got football. He thinks 20 years from now, the NFL will still be king. He's got the NBA in the 2 slot, MLB, soccer, hockey, MMA, NASCAR. Pete, how we doing, man? What do you got? If you're going to rank them 2040, what's the order?
I will stick with football as number 1. I think the NFL will find its way. It always seems to find its way. But number 2 is going to be soccer. I think the EPL, the English Premier League, I always find it to be quite interesting. 3, I see basketball. I see the NBA. The NBA knows how to market itself around the world. 4, I'm hopeful it's hockey. I really am. I think the NHL has found a lot of its footing, but it also has its own problems. And 5, I see MLB. I think MLB is just a powder keg of a mess that's going to explode at some point.
So you guys both have the NFL in the top slot. Pete, NFL 20 years from now, no, it's still number 1. Not worried about the concussion issues, not worried about some of the issues that they're having in terms of a little bit of backlash from the fan base. Not worried about any of that stuff.
I think they figure themselves out. I think they will find a way. They always seem to find a way, the NFL.
That's a good point. I mean, they have really since, the game in 1958, they've been finding a way since then and continuing to ascend since then. I think that we're going to see a change in the next 20 years, but we'll get to that in a second. Richie, man, you're putting soccer in the 4 slot, and it seemed when you said it like you had some kind of a disdain for this sport, which is pretty much the rest of the world thinks is the greatest sport in the world. But you seem to have said it with a little bit of hate in your voice.
I wouldn't say that. I would say.
I mean, that's what it came across. I mean, people can kind of rewind it. They can listen to it. It kind of came across as though there's really this. As if even just uttering the word really gave you some problems here.
No, look, you said it came across with a little bit of disdain and a little bit of hate, and I hope it came across with a lot more than a little bit.
Ooh.
I mean, it should come across with a lot of disdain and a lot of hate. So I apologize to the people, because if it just came across as a little, that's on me. My bad.
Okay. So all right. So. Go through it. I'm still holding back for a second here.
I love that Dimitri gets to just hold back, like, oh, you get to go when you go, but that's fine.
Listen, let you guys talk about it, and let's not bury the lead. I'm going to tell them what 2040 will look like. They're going to get the answer from me. So at least let's just amuse them with your ramblings for a few minutes. Go ahead.
I'm not going to go why football's number 1 yet. I'm going to wait until you besmirch the sport and don't put it at number 1.
Okay.
But I will say this with soccer, what's the score? It's 0-0. So, I mean, that's number 1.
Hold on. Soccer is not that boring. And I was like,
that boring. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement.
It's not that boring. But you got to remember something. You guys know me. Well, the Greeks know me a long time. Richie, we've known each other for a bit now. I was never a soccer guy until the last 4 or 5 years, and I've learned to appreciate it. I mean, you watch matches and you can see, you're watching college football on Channel 5 on a Saturday or Channel 7, and NBC is running the EPL. I mean, they're not running it on NBCSN. They're running it on Channel 4 or whatever the major affiliate is for them, because there are people watching soccer in 2020 in the United States on a Saturday, which is college football Saturday.
What time is the game on?
Today was, I believe it was a 2:00 game.
Okay.
1 o'clock, something like that.
Are they ever on at 8 p.m.? And I'm asking you, is it ever on 9 p.m., 8 p.m., 7 p.m.?
It can't be. They're 5 hours ahead.
And that's the one valid point you're going to make. And I'm going to tell you, so I'm going to give you the list. I'm going to let everybody know right now so we can get into it here. I'm going to let everybody know exactly what's going to go down in 2040. Soccer will be number 1. That's happening. It's on its way to happening. You've heard it. You didn't hear it here first, but because you've heard it, I'm just validating it and confirming it. Soccer will be 1. The NBA will be 2. The NFL will be 3. Major League Baseball will be 4, and NHL will be 5. And I'm going to tell you. So let's go with the soccer. We'll get to the rest of them. But Rich. You're right about the one thing. That's going to be the one issue is you can't get these games in prime time, and that there's an issue there. So we can understand that. But the reality is, if people right now can shop at home and they can work at home and they can learn at home, then someone in New York can root for a team in London, right? And so it's not really that the MLB or the NFL are going to be overtaken by MLS, which, by the way, is doing a lot better than I think you might give it credit for. But they're going to be competing with, like Pete said, they're going to be competing with the EPL, with Serie A, with La Liga. There's just so much content out there. Content is king, and soccer has so much of it. Beyond and really beyond that, you have it's a new time. It's a dawn of a new era. Our population has changed, and you really shouldn't be looking at what we think is good. I mean, you should be looking at the 5 to 25-year-old demographic, the 5-year-old to 25-year-old, because 20 years from now, they're the ones who are going to be 25 to 45. Yeah, and the 5 to 25-year-old, okay, well, the studies are already out there. The 5 to 25-year-old, for them, it's soccer and basketball already. So why would it change? And not only with 5 to 25, but even beyond 5 to 25, when you're talking about major cities, when you're talking about urban areas, when you're talking about the East and West Coast, it's soccer and it's basketball. In the heartland and in the South, yeah, football and baseball are still king. But that's not where the majority of our population is, and that's not where the majority of our purchasing power is. So already there's a shift to soccer and to basketball, with the younger part of our population. So what's going to just all of a sudden cause a U-turn? There's nothing. There's nothing that's going to stop that. So it's going in that direction. Already going in that direction.
Couple of problems with
okay.
One, listen, I'm in my late 40s, and when I was growing up, soccer was the number one sport that people played in America. So
but not that they watched. Let's clarify. I understand the old timers. Oh, people have always played it. I get it. But people haven't always consumed it. They are now consuming it. There's a huge difference. So you can't but you can't go give me what was happening in 1978. This country has never consumed soccer. They are now consuming it. They are now buying it. Huge difference. Go ahead, but it's a huge difference.
I understand that. I'm just saying, let's get before you start going crazy. I get we played it when I was a kid, not me. But
again, you played it, consuming and playing. But go ahead. We just have to get that out to the listener. Go ahead.
They got it. So here's the point, though, about it. One, when you're 5 to 25, you're the most selfish you're ever going to be in life, okay? Because you're not thinking about, you don't have kids, you're not thinking about anyone else but yourself. As these people grow older, what are they going to do? Yeah, they might say, hey, I love this. But guess what? At 9:30 a.m. on a Saturday, they're going to be taking their kids to their own soccer game. They're going to be taking their kids to whatever sporting event they have. And it's just not going to be able to grow more than it is because they don't have the games on prime time. And that's so big. That's not like a little thing. The second thing that you're missing is who gets to hold the ticker tape parade? What U.S. city holds a ticker tape parade when Belarus wins the World Cup? They don't. They're not going to. Like the city of New York is not going to celebrate London winning the EPL or whatever team. It's just not. There's no civic pride, and that's big. Those two big things: no primetime games and no civic pride, and that's huge. Because let me tell you something. With the no primetime games, you see it in the NBA. I mean, in Major League Baseball, they never have a World Series game before 8:20 p.m. or whatever.
And those ratings are fantastic. So number one, good thing that DVRs are going to be invented at some point. Oh, wait, they were. Good thing that you have the internet that gives us this instant access. And the civic pride, too, we're not that parochial anymore. That's the reality. New York is full of Golden State Warrior fans. So the idea that there's this, oh my God, we all need to root for the Knicks. That's not the way we live anymore. So that's just, come on.
No, that's not true at all, though. Like, sure, listen, we grew up, there was Cowboy fans, there's Steeler fans, of course, in New York. That we all know that. But listen, my nieces, I have my sister has triplets, and they all go to the University of Tampa. And in 2000, when we're doing this podcast, it's been a really good year for Tampa. The Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup. My nieces, who couldn't name one single player in the NHL outside of, I don't know if they can name Wayne Gretzky, okay? They're all rocking their Tampa Bay Lightning shirts. My traitorous nephew, who I love, Adam, big Ranger fan, wearing his Tampa Bay Lightning shirt because they're in Tampa. It's civic pride. That stuff matters. People care. People want to go to the game. You're going to want to take your kid to go to the game that they watch, and they can't do that in London or the Ukraine or Kamchatka. They can't do that. You can't take your kid to the game to see their heroes, and that's going to be a problem. So you're going to want your hero to be a little more local.
Yeah, but you're giving us an example of, okay, fine. So they have this pride in the Rays for 3 weeks. That has nothing to do with the popularity of a sport over a 20-year period or over a 3-month period, over a year period. So because people care about the Rays for 2 weeks or the Lightning for a couple of weeks and they wear a shirt, doesn't really have a place in this argument. Pete, man, what do you got?
Starting with the civic pride, we the three of us live around a city that when the Giants won the Super Bowl in '86, did not hold a ticker tape parade for him because, the mayor of New York was still pissed off they built a new stadium across in New Jersey. There was no ticker tape in '86. So put that aside. Civic pride's a pile of you-know-what. It's not really real, especially for certain markets. And we're going to have a podcast about that one day where some of these markets the fans are just ridiculous. Now, you're talking about there's no games in primetime. The NFL is going to move a team to London. It's coming. The stadium that Tottenham plays for is designed to hold NFL games. And it's not just for the London series. It's designed for a team to move there. The NFL has figured out a way to make a team play in London, and they're going to figure it out. And those games are going to be at odd times. Why wouldn't somebody want to watch Tottenham play or Manchester City at a weird time? Or like Dimitri said, there is a DVR. Sorry, Greek, I will take care of that. You can find a way to watch it and see it over television, over something saved. It's not a problem. The NFL's figuring it out.
It's one team. It's not a whole league of 9 a.m. games. It's one team. Listen, I love when Jacksonville plays a competitive game at 9 a.m. in England. That's awesome. I wake up, I turn on the game at halftime. Hey, Jacksonville's losing 17-14. I'm sure they're going to lose to the Rams by 3 or 4 points. Let me watch the end of the game. It's awesome. It's a lot of fun. And then I get to the real stuff, the 1 o'clock. And I have a pile of wings, even though I don't anymore. But like, whatever. You get the point. It's the real meat and potatoes is the 1 p.m. games, the 4 p.m. game, the Sunday night game, the Monday night game. And if you want to throw in a 9 a.m. game, that's awesome. I love that. But I wouldn't want all the games to be at 9 a.m. because that's Eastern time. In Western time, that's 6 a.m. Nobody's watching that.
But they're not all at 9 a.m. They're not. The EPL moves the game times around. They'll have a 12, they'll have a 3. They play late in the UK. They do. They do play games later in the evening. They happen. And if you really want to figure it out, pick up the NBC Peacock app and you can pick up every EPL game, including the one that they're running on the main channel and the one they're running on NBCSN. You can watch them all now, all of them. It's building. It's building. I mean, look, it pains me to say that I think it's going to overtake baseball. I don't think it overtakes football, but you know what? It's going to be something that we're going to be watching all over the place because it just keeps growing.
And the kids are watching it. That's what I think that's the more important thing is I can tell you. And again, this is just, the sample size that I'm going by is just, my life, but it's still a pretty substantial sample size given the things that I do for a living and the communities that I'm involved in. And the reality is that these kids anywhere from 5 years old into their mid 20s, kids that I work with, that I coach, I can have a discussion with them about who the soccer stars in the world are, who the basketball stars in the world are. They know nothing about who the baseball stars are. They know nothing about even the NFL. As much as they kind of know the teams and they watch the big games, they really can't tell me much about the players. And that's already. And by the way, to look at trends, bring the MLS into it for a second. The reality is their attendance has gone up about 60% in the last 20 years, while MLB has had a 12-year decline. Each year for 12 straight years, their attendance declined. Then obviously you take the pandemic, there is no attendance, so you throw it out. But for the 12 years before that, you've had 12 consecutive years, man. Wake up. It just doesn't change magically. There's nothing that's going to change. And with baseball, first it was like nobody under 10 cared about it. Then nobody under 20 cared about it. Now you're getting to a point where nobody under 30 really cares about it. So when do you get it, man? When do you start to realize when it's nobody under 70? Because that's where it's going, right? As a guy who spent so much time coaching my own baseball players, guys who actually like it and who play it and who spend time playing it and who've played at Division I levels and have made it to the minor leagues, who talk to these kids, they don't even know who's on these teams. Right. So, and don't tell me about the kids playing Little League because that's even in decline. So the reality is it's changing no matter how much you want to believe it or not, Rich.
Well, I put it at number 3. I didn't put it at number 1. I put it.
You put it at number 4. Just saying.
Well, here's a couple. We'll get to baseball in a second, but you're missing the big point about football. Why do people care about football? The money. People care about betting.
Doesn't mean they have to watch it. They could bet. That's not going to tell you its popularity. You can put the money on it and still not be actively engaged, which is starting to happen, by the way. How many people with a fantasy team that just check their app at the end of the day? I know a lot.
But let me tell you something. Football is still the high. And during the pandemic, every sports declined incredibly. Football is still the highest rated shows on network TV. So football is still king. Football has the money. You can't take gambling. You're like gambling isn't. You don't think gambling's important? Of course, gambling's important.
Who said gambling's not important? But gambling has nothing to do with being engaged in a sport. You can still gamble on it.
Absolutely. People watch their bets. Of course, people don't watch their bets, but people do also watch their bets. And people bet more on football than probably all the sports combined in America. So, of course, it's going to stay number 1. And people are going to bet more football than soccer.
If we were talking to you back, about a century ago, you would tell me that boxing would have stayed number 1. The reality is, at what point?
No, I put baseball at number 3. Baseball was number 1. I put it at number 3. So don't act like I'm this old fossil over here. I put baseball number 3 for a variety of reasons. I also think that baseball is going to come up a little because I think there's a lot of smart people in baseball that realize this is terrible. I think they realize that Rob Manfred is terrible for the game. The owners are terrible for the game. Some guys like Trevor Bauer, his agent, Pete Alonso has a YouTube channel. I mean, yeah, you can make fun of Pete Alonso has a YouTube channel. the point being, the players are starting to realize, hey, we got to market ourselves better because baseball isn't. And if you want to move up from number 3 or at least stay at number 3, they got to improve. And I hope they're going to realize that. But either way, football and betting is king. Everyone talks
you
about
act as you can't bet on the other sports. Soccer and betting have been king for a long time. I mean, they actually on their jerseys wear the names of gambling companies. So they had that market cornered well before football. So again, it's as if you've discovered gambling. So that has nothing to do with holding back soccer. They gamble at the stadiums. They gamble at the on the corner.
Hold on for a second. We're also in this country, we're so set in our Puritan ways about gambling. It's ridiculous. The Europeans will bet on anything and everything, especially in the UK. There's a gambling, there's a place that really bets every block. It's just the way it is. And they bet soccer all day long, and they don't even they'll bet every league too. It doesn't matter if it's the top league, the EPL, or if it's, the fifth league, the conference. They don't care. They'll bet anything and everything. But I agree with Richie to a point about football and gambling and football. I think the NFL has always figured a way to make it work. That's how the NFL has been since '58. They always find a way to make it work. Unlike baseball, who can't figure out anything ever. Baseball is its own worst enemy and has been its own worst enemy for 20-something years. And they can't, ownership's greedy. They got teams that are worth billions and billions of dollars, and they don't give a rat's ass about their fans ever.
Yeah, and that's why it went from number 1 to number 3 over the years. The interesting thing is going to be basketball, because basketball to me is the one that's really hard to put, because here's the thing with basketball. It started to gain popularity big time with Bird and Magic. And then, of course, Jordan took it to new heights. When Jordan left, there was a little bit of a slump where Kobe really couldn't keep up with Jordan, but LeBron could. And LeBron made it big again, and now, of course, who's LeBron better than Jordan? Everyone's so sick and tired of that. When LeBron leaves, when LeBron is no longer one of the best players in basketball, who's going to take the mantle? Because I think that's not as important in football or baseball or probably soccer as any other sport than it is in basketball. People in basketball want that top player. They crave that top player. And who's it going to be? And I don't see anybody in 2020 that's going to be able to take the reins like LeBron has taken the reins.
He's out there. I think you're being a little myopic with it. The NBA is in great shape. I think they're already a global brand in what's an increasingly connected world. And that's not a small thing. We can't just keep looking at the United States. The point is the world's becoming more and more connected. So it's huge in Europe. You have the EuroLeague. It's big in the South American countries like Brazil and Argentina. It's huge in China. They have the best commissioner in sports. Adam Silver is a leader. He's a visionary. David Stern was a great leader. He was a visionary. So, and they show the importance of a great leader. And so I think they have this solid foundation to go forward. MLB, the NFL, the owners put puppets, right? They put puppets in there. They have yes men in the commissioner spot. Although with the MLB, we might be starting to see hopefully a change from there. But those leagues have issues that I don't know are going to be addressed. The NBA has leaders that are going to continue to move the sport forward. They know how to market their stars. It's not like they just discovered YouTube. Great. Pete Alonso has a YouTube channel. Terrific. Okay. The NBA understands how to market their stars. They know how to basically connect with their fan base. They have a good grasp of what's going on. So the NBA is in great shape. The one thing I'll tell you, before I finish the NBA point, just to answer what you said about the NFL, the NFL, I think there's some push and pull factors. It can go either way, but here's a problem with the NFL is how long are you going to succeed if nobody plays your sport? That's a problem, okay? Because what happens is as we are more educated in this society about the dangers of playing football, and as the more educated and, the more well-versed part of our society kind of turns away from playing the sport, it's going to be hard to continue to have this long-term success. So when you look at boxing, remember, boxing was a sport. You go back in time, every high school had a boxing team. The Ivy League schools had boxing teams. What happened? Well, eventually the upper class stopped boxing. Then the upper middle class stopped. Then the middle class stopped. Then, even the lower class stopped boxing. Eventually, it's just people turned to boxing just as a way maybe to get out of bad neighborhoods or to get out of some type of financial despair. But we kept watching boxing because we could gamble on boxing. It was an event sport, but ultimately it didn't hold this huge appeal because nobody was actually boxing. We would just watch it when a big event came along every 8 weeks. Is football on that path? I don't know. There's a lot of push and pull factors, but I think it'd be ignorant just to dismiss the precedent that boxing has set, or even you can go back a long time ago to the gladiator times. I think once society gets turned off from participating in something, it's only a matter of time before, they want to watch it, but if they don't actually do it, you're going to have long-term consequences to the popularity of it. That's just the reality.
Couple of things. One, you said myopic about like you can't just look at America. The topic is America. This is literally the topic. We talked about the president of the United States.
I'm sorry. Did we just build a wall and keep everybody out of America? Yeah, it's America. Rich and people from all over the world live in America. People who watched other things and grew up playing other things and have other interests. Yeah, that's the whole point.
It's still America. It's still good. The heartland is still the heartland. America is still America. So you can't dismiss how America feels when the topic is how it will be in America. I mean, come on.
And that's not understanding that there's been a whole new wave of immigration of people who...
Of course, people will immigrate here. We understand that.
But they bring their interests with them.
And
the world is way more connected. So the reality is, again, you can't go back to 1972. I can just watch anything that's happening in Germany right now.
I think that when we're talking about America, and yes, we all know that people will immigrate to this country and people will also leave this country and they'll bring their interest to this country. I get that. But they will also watch the TV that is on this country. And the TV will be basketball, will be baseball, will be football. You bring up a good point about boxing, about because when we were growing up, boxing was a big deal. And now
a big deal every few weeks or every few months.
Sure, but I mean, we had Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Mike Tyson. We knew who Larry Holmes was, the Spinks brothers. We knew name a current boxer. I mean, it's funny. The last 2 boxing matches I've watched just randomly, they had a big controversy over the people scoring them because clearly someone was paid off because someone like me who knows nothing about boxing realized that somebody got paid off because 2 people had the score like 128 to 122, another person had it 125 124 to the other guy. So the crookedness in boxing, which was going on in our day, is still very prevalent today, and that's obviously why boxing is one of the reasons why it'll never grow back.
Well, hold on, but Greek, you went on about boxing, but there's now MMA. And MMA is whether you want to say it's an offshoot of what boxing was, it's more violent than boxing, and it's growing exponentially. Every match that's on pay-per-view, I mean, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It went from small networks like Spike. ESPN's doing the preliminary card on regular. They're doing the pay-per-view. MMA is more violent than boxing ever was, and it just keeps growing.
There's a ceiling, though. They basically had the quarantine audience to themselves, and it hasn't grown to the level that you thought that it might have. It's not like the average person is now an MMA fan, and they had the entire country captive with nothing else to do. They beat everybody to the punch, and they gave us content when nobody else, could or would, whatever the case was. And UFC, it's growing, but the reality is there's a ceiling there. These other sports, may have a floor, but UFC, MMA, they have a ceiling, and they're not going to go beyond that ceiling. I think we've already seen that. And as much as everybody, I mean, you go back to last summer, I was just checking some ratings where they were losing to UFC. I guess it was UFC 241 on ESPN that lost substantially in ratings to NFL preseason football and to NASCAR and NBC. And again, a quarantine audience that had no live programming, that was thirsting for live programming. Many of them still didn't take to UFC. So there's definitely a ceiling that they're going to hit their head against. I would say that.
The 2 problems with UFC is, one, it's a rich man sport. You can't, it's $300 a month to participate in an MMA class. Like, it's very expensive. So it's hard to participate. But the other problem is, with the UFC is it's star driven, and when you create such giant stars like Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey, and then when those stars are no longer either stars or they retired, and now yet the best players are the best fighters, the people that you don't really know, or they're not as media savvy, they're not as good looking as Ronda Rousey, which plays a part. Sorry, it does. It really does lose a little steam, and I don't think it could hold up. I do think it'll still be big in 2040. I did put it as, I think I put it at 5 or 6 with NASCAR, but I thought it could go past the NHL, but I do think it has a ceiling.
And we didn't mention the NHL. I just think the NHL, even though I had it 5, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's the ultimate niche sport. It has its fan base. Its fans love it. Its fans always will love it. They know who they are. They know what they are. They do what they do well. They understand that they have to guard against, salaries going up exponentially. They do a good job of that. The NHL, I think we put it at 5, but it's not necessarily a knock. So when we say that, MLB is 4, that's a huge knock considering where it fell from. To say the NHL is going to be 5, which I think we all have it at 5. Pete had it at 4. It's not necessarily a knock on the NHL. The NHL just is what it is, and that's its place in the sports landscape. So at least with me, I'm not knocking it. I just think that's what it is, and it does its job.
I don't think it's number 4 right. I mean, you could make a case it's not number 4 right now. I mean, nobody cares about the NHL. Like, you have Connor McDavid, the best player in Edmonton.
Well, hockey fans care about it.
Yeah. Of course, listen, badminton fans care about badminton. The fans of whatever sport care about whatever.
Yeah, but you're still selling out. You're right, but you're still selling out these 18,000 seat arenas, or at least we'll see where we go with that. But you're selling out your arenas. Your particular fans watch you on TV. You're generating revenue. I mean, it's carved out its spot, and I think it's going to be okay. I guess that's the point I'm making. And by the way, I would use that as a jumping off point. The one thing with the NHL and the culture of these sports, and I think why soccer and basketball, and it's just something that I've noticed from being around these sports, and our audience may not resonate with it. You guys might not, but it's something that I see. So you take these soccer guys, they grow up playing in academies, right? So they play on these academies, and you're seeing it with basketball now with these kids who grow up playing AAU. These academies and these AAU teams, more than just making them into better players, they're also teaching them about being young men and young women and how to deal with the world and how to deal with the media. And so these soccer stars and these basketball stars, they come into the league very media savvy, and you watch soccer players. A soccer player who's going to grow up, who could be from a South American country or could be from a neighborhood in France, winds up going and playing in England and playing in Germany, learning these languages, respecting the fan base, knowing how to connect with the fans. There's something that these soccer players who come out of these academies, they understand, they respect their sport, they respect where they're playing. It's an interesting thing to watch. Same thing with these basketball guys. Basketball, of course, was not always like this, but the recent basketball player who comes from the AAU, they understand, they respect the fan base, they say the right things. Baseball and football are lacking that. And again, that's something that maybe our fans, the people who are listening to this, or fans in general, maybe they connect with it, maybe they don't. But the soccer guy, the basketball guy, the hockey player has always been like this, coming, through the juniors. They have a respect for the game. They have a respect for the team they're playing for. That's no small thing. And I think it's an advantage that soccer and basketball have. Again, it's something that being around these sports my whole life that I've noticed. And it is a big deal. It's a big deal.
I was going to say baseball is surprising that it's not like that, you have a minor league system. I mean, the whole idea was they bring you up through the minor leagues. You should be learning these things, and they don't.
No,
baseball, let's be honest, with the contraction of the minor league system and how they're changing, and they really don't want to even fund it anymore. They don't want it there. But this is why I have a problem with baseball, and why I think baseball in 2040 is going to be number 5. I think Major League Baseball has lost its way in so many different ways. The most affordable thing out there is minor league baseball, and they don't want it. They don't want to have teams.
No, it's an interesting thing. There's just the culture of baseball. It's not knocking baseball, but I've traveled around the country with coaching baseball teams and coaching soccer teams. the soccer players will all come, when we go for breakfast in the morning, they all dress a certain way to breakfast. They come, they shake my hand. They ask me how I'm doing. Good morning, coach. It's a different thing, the way they carry themselves. The baseball guys, I love the baseball guys, but they are that's not them. It's not, they're not a please and thank you kind of crowd. You have to instill that in them as their coach, but it's not something that they're bringing to the table. My soccer guys, they bring that to the table. They just understand there's a way to behave. There's a way to act towards the fans. There's a way to act towards coaches. And they have this in them from 13, 14, 15 years old. It's interesting. I mean, I would demand that of my teams anyway, but you just see it in my soccer players and in my baseball guys. It's something that I've got to put in them. They don't come to the table with it. So I don't know long term if that factors into it, but I'm telling you, I know Rich is, oh no, but that's a big deal, dude. When you have that,
those
people are looking for that.
Going to be more important than the please and thank you of the soccer people. I think we're talking about a minuscule.
No, but when you understand minuscule. When a kid from France, make sure that he learns the English language, learns the German language, okay, learns Dutch, learns all these languages to communicate with their fans. But a baseball player, right? But Yoenis Cespedes can be here for 6 years and not do an interview. That's a huge difference in the sports. That's not there's nothing minuscule about that. If Cespedes was a soccer player, they would demand that he learn the language. The idea that you can have guys like Tanaka who are going to sit there with translators, and I get it, because the organizations don't want them to say the wrong thing. That's fine. These guys obviously. That's a huge thing.
But it's not I was back when I was a reporter. I remember interviewing El Duque. So I asked El Duque a question in English, and El Duque, the translator is starting to translate, and El Duque is answering my question. He understood me perfectly, but he doesn't want to. And I, he doesn't want to embarrass himself. And of course, he wouldn't be embarrassing. He knows 2 languages.
Okay, whatever.
Let me just finish. So, first off, I don't know 2 languages, so mad props to all these people that know a second language, and they
4 and 5 languages.
Or 5 languages, and they think that they're embarrassing themselves, which they're not, but they think that they are, so that's why they don't do it. It's not a big deal.
It's a huge deal. You can't see, you keep getting into the reasoning behind these things. The reasoning is whatever it is, doesn't matter the reasoning. The reality is, if your Major League Baseball keeps putting these guys out there that can't even converse with their fans, where a soccer player can always converse with their fans, that's huge. It's huge.
The vast majority of players are going to understand English and speak English. That's still, you're talking about 1 or 2 players.
We're talking about stars, and we can go through them. You can go through consistently when players come here from Japan, from Latin American countries. They use translators. When you watch the soccer players, the translator is there, and these players, it's expected that they learn the language of the country.
When Cespedes was crushing baseballs for the Mets and was getting them almost single-handedly to the World Series, do you think Met fans were like, well,
again, myopic? You're talking about what happens in a 3-week span. I'm talking about growing a sport. If you can't speak the language of a team, of a country, you can't grow a sport. Again, you keep telling me about 2 weeks. Oh, somebody wore a Tampa shirt because they were good over 2 weeks.
I didn't bring up Cespedes. You brought up Cespedes. Cespedes was amazing. People love Cespedes. And what happened? They still love Cespedes, even though he couldn't speak. Hold on, let me finish. So they still loved him. And then when it became time to resign him, the Mets resigned him. There was joy, even though he couldn't go to a press conference because he didn't speak the English language. The fans rejoiced. So your example of Cespedes falls flat because it
doesn't fall flat. Not even a little bit does it fall flat, because we're talking about growing a sport over time. You telling me that fans love a player because he got him to a World Series? Yeah, he did. How'd that turn out, by the way? How'd the relationship between Cespedes and the Met fan go?
Because he stunk. Well, he stopped playing. You were telling me if he had a great career, they would have been mad because he couldn't speak English. Do you think Ichiro is
growing a sport? Dude, what are we talking about here? We're talking about growing a game. We're not talking about if a team wins a championship. You're talking about growing a game. You can't grow a game if you can't speak the language of the country you're trying to grow it in. It's a real simple point. It's a super duper simple point that if you come to a country, right, and you can't speak the language of the fans, and you don't bother to learn the language of the fans, okay, and you don't speak the language of the people who are paying you, you're not going to build a relationship of players who do. That's a reality. Culture counts. Culture is huge. So you want to give me who's going to World Series? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
This is not worldwide. We're talking about America. You said Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is the president in 2040. So that's what I'm going by. And guess what? In Major League Baseball, the majority of players will be able to speak the English language. The vast majority of players will be able to speak the English language. I don't disagree with your point. If there was 25 players and only 2 or 3 spoke the English language, that would be a problem. But since 22, 21 out of the 25, 26 players can, it's not a problem. And the 4 or 5 that can't, as long as they're great like Cespedes, they don't care. Do you think Seattle, they're going to retire Ichiro's number?
Again, you're giving these examples of great. Fine, a city's going to love a player who's great, of course. But what we're talking about,
a player that
growing the sport. And when somebody endears themselves to your community, okay, and then they can grow the game. And by the way, they can now go into the community, right? They can work with the kids. They can develop more of a fan base. They can develop younger fans because they bother to speak the language. They go into the communities. It's a huge difference. It's not just about winning in that season. It's not just about becoming popular with a fan base because you were a good player. We're talking about growing a sport. And soccer guys and basketball guys are being taught that from a young age at this point. Basketball, by the way, this is a very new phenomenon in basketball. Basketball has had a huge public relation issue for a long time. Basketball, this is a pretty new thing. Soccer and hockey. Now, hockey, like we said, it's a niche sport, but these hockey guys forever. I mean, these, growing up on Long Island, the Islanders, a big part of their popularity was becoming part of the Long Island community. These Canadian guys who come in here and had a respect for the fans. That was a big part of the Islanders growing and of hockey growing on Long Island, was the presence of these players who didn't just come here and then just leave, a year or 2 later. That was a big deal. Again, the NHL is not a great example because the NHL, I think, has a ceiling, but it's a huge thing, and it's going to help soccer. It's going to help basketball. And if baseball doesn't change, it's going to, I'm not saying that it's going to hurt baseball, but it's going to limit its growth. That's just common sense.
In soccer, if you're going to talk about Americans, soccer, the vast majority of the sport that will have the least amount of people speaking the English language will be soccer, because they won't be playing it in America. They'll be playing it in Brazil. So they're not going to have English translators possibly, because they don't care about the people of New York. The people of Brazil care about the people of Brazil. So when you're talking about it, jumping up all these sports because nobody in baseball is going to be able to speak English anymore. Well, the people in soccer won't be able to speak English because they're not in America.
Well, that's why Pete starts with the EPL. And they speak English in England. There was this whole thing with the colonies, Rich, and they came over here in North America. He started with the EPL. I mean, listen, we don't have time for the whole thing, but England came over. They took 13 colonies. Then we got our independence. That's why we're speaking in English right now. It comes from this country, England. The whole it's a long story, Rich. I'll fill you in some other time. It's a whole thing, but that's why Pete started with the EPL. All right, that's why and I agreed. You're what you're saying makes sense for La Liga, Bundesliga, all that stuff. Which that we'll still see a lot of growth here. But that's why Pete starts with the EPL.
The EPL, the English leagues in themselves, and remember, there's a pyramid of 10 leagues, or 10 pyramid steps in the English leagues, and the EPL is the most popular professional league in the world, hands down. Even the Champions League, the second league, is more popular than most first leagues in other countries around the world. League One is more popular than some of those leagues as well. Even League Two, which is the 4th step. So, yeah, they speak a lot of English. And, yes, they do. Even the small teams, they may have a translator, but these guys, they do. I listen to these League Two games, and the guys that are French know English. The guys that are German speak English. They don't use their translators. They speak the language. They do.
It's a respect that they have. It's just an interesting thing. I didn't mean it to go to the direction it did. I just wanted to bring it up as a small point, but it's ultimately, I don't think it's going to be a small point. They're just raised with this. There's a culture. And again, I noticed it always in hockey. It's just a culture of respect that's there in soccer. It's starting to take root in basketball. And I think it's going to help them. And that culture of respect is not there in baseball. It's not there in football. It's not. And I think that's going to factor into this. That's all I'm saying. Richie, you mentioned you threw I think you threw NASCAR into there.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, I mentioned MMA and NASCAR. I mean, I think, they're beyond popular right now. And I think it's just gonna, I think like you said, there's a ceiling for both of those sports. I mean, I don't think NASCAR will ever be big in Long Island, New York. I don't think it's gonna ever be big in LA necessarily, like as far as like, as it is down south. But I do think that it could jump the NHL theoretically. I mean, for me, it's not an interesting sport to watch. 500 left turns. I'll watch the last 2 minutes of any sporting event, including soccer. I'll watch the last 2 minutes of any sporting event. So you tell me that the Indy 500 is 5 minutes away from ending, I'll turn on the TV.
But it's not NASCAR. That's IndyCar.
Well, the point is,
and F1 draws more fans than NASCAR or IndyCar. I've been to NASCAR. NASCAR is interesting. I mean, it is. I've been to Darlington. I've seen the Southern 500. I was in the infield. It is crazy. It's just not going to take root in northern cities. It just won't.
I meant, you know what? NASCAR might not have been. Maybe I should have said like racing in general.
F1, on the other hand, if you ever actually watch Formula One, I don't think we had a single race in America this year for F1 because of 2020 and our wonderful COVID issues. But F1, the amount of fans worldwide is absolutely ridiculous. And they have figured out how to grow motorsports better than anybody. If you actually sit there, the access you have to these racers is unbelievable. Hamilton last week beat Schumacher out for the most wins ever in F1 racing. I mean, it was unbelievable. The access they gave to you. Sky Sports is in his face, in his face as much as they can be in a COVID, getting his feelings as he's crying because he's now set the record. This English kid who was a nobody for so long, and all of a sudden 10, 15 years ago is on the scene, and he's now beaten the greatest F1 racer ever in the amount of first places he's ever had. It's pretty remarkable. They know how to grow their sport, and F1 is a very good job.
We're going to have to talk about on another podcast about how to grow sports. I mean, I think baseball is fell in large part because they just, they were so high and pie in the sky, with like, they felt their way is the only way. And we'll tell you how to grow. We'll show, if we want you to grow, we'll tell you. And like someone like Trevor Bauer is like, no, I'm going to grow myself. Someone like Pete Alonso is like, hey, I want to make a name for myself. I think more baseball players need to do this because I see it happening in other sports. And, of course, with Twitter blowing up and everything else, people are going to try to market themselves for a career after their sport because as successful as you could be in the sport, it could end at any moment. And you might not be a millionaire anymore when you're 40 or 50 years old, and you better have some kind of job. And I think, and I hope baseball really becomes, smartens up because they need to.
And here's one thing too, that by the way, we did a different podcast. We did a podcast on tanking that I think you guys want to listen to, but here's why I think soccer makes a jump. It's tank proof. I think tanking, and again, we don't want to get too into it. We have another podcast on it. You really should check it out. We did a whole podcast on tanking. It's awesome. But we've talked about it. We disagreed slightly. We've agreed on some things, but to an extent, at least in this country, tanking has hurt. The idea of tanking has hurt Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL, to different extents in different fan bases. Soccer's tank proof. The way that soccer is set up, and you want to check out our other podcast, but you can't tank in soccer, right? It's it's so weird, but it's in some ways it's the most American of all sports because what's that?
No, go on.
You have to win. There's just nothing. I mean, it's not like you want to tank for the number one pick. If you finish last, you're actually thrown out of the league. You have to go. You're relegated to a different league. That's like a baseball team going to AAA. Again, we're not set up for that with our sports here. I get it. So that's not, that's what I'm trying to say. But they are. And there's some. What's that?
Can you tank for the second worst pick? Like if all of a sudden I see like a team is like, I'm like whatever, like 6 games ahead of them, and I know I'm not.
We're talking about. You're asking about soccer.
Yeah.
Well, there's no. Yeah, go ahead, Pete. You can't tank, and go ahead, Pete.
Soccer is not built like that. There are no drafts. They don't do drafts. Soccer's every team, no matter how high or low they are, has their own academy. So they foster their own players up. They try to keep their own players, and they buy players. You pay for players on the open market. That's how soccer works. So if you're an EPL team like Tottenham, you have enough money to go out and get yourself a top-flight player. And if you're 3 leagues down, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to build your team on free transfers, guys from your academy and stuff like that. But as you get better, if your team gets better, you can move yourself up from that fourth league to this third league, so on and so forth. Or you can drop down if you don't get any better. And as you build your team, you're basically paying for it. There is no draft. It doesn't. Drafts don't exist.
So it's funny because me and Smooth played in the same hockey league, and there were teams that were just, they were good, but if they were too good, they would lose.
Smooth, he means me, but anyway.
Greek would play we played on the same team. So if you reached a high enough level, you would lose because other teams are just better than you. So a lot of teams would try to get under that level so they could go on a level like the third or fourth division and win the fourth division instead of getting killed in the third. So in soccer, would people rather win the third division?
No, because it's money. So it's all, I know what you're getting at, but it's money. Basically, it's the weirdest thing. And this is something I noticed even as a kid, which before I was really into, even when I played it and coached it, I didn't really follow it at the time. But I noticed this. It's interesting. It's the most American of all sports. You have to win because the more you win, the more money you make. So the higher up you finish, the more money that's going to be generated. Because what happens is not only and by the way, the NBA, Adam Silver, who's their commissioner, is trying to mirror this. There's also, while your season is going on, there's also all these different tournaments. So you always have a motivation. So the higher up you finish, you can get entry into these different tournaments. Now, the more tournaments that you're in, whatever, we're not going to explain all soccer. I'm just kind of trying to really dumb it down right here. You're trying to get into these tournaments. Obviously, the more tournaments you get into, or the further you go, the more money your team is going to make. Now, the more money your team makes, you can buy better players, or you can put it into your academy to develop better players. So you're always incentivized to win. The lower you go, you're going to lose money, because now if you wind up in the second division or the third division, you don't have the same television rights. You don't have, you're playing against teams that are inferior. Go ahead, Pete.
But they get paid. They actually
they get paid. No, they get paid. But
when you drop from the EPL to the Champions League, they actually get a check. They get a check because they are losing a certain amount of money. So when Fulham dropped a few years back, they got a very large parachute check leaving the EPL going to Champions.
But they can't qualify for Champions League. They can't qualify for Europa. They can't. So it's still right. It's still, man, it's the thing is, well, I see you over there, Rich. So the thing is that he doesn't like the point, because he's being this is a podcast, but Rich, he's rolling his eyes over here because intelligent conversation is happening about soccer. But no, it's the most American. You have to win each game, and ultimately that's what's going to. And by the way, it's very American, because these players, when they sign a contract, they only belong to that team. If you sign with the Mets can trade you to the Blue Jays because you also belong to Major League Baseball. You only belong in soccer to the team that signed you. So they can't trade unless you agree to go to the team. They own that. It's really, when you look at the economics of the sport, it's the most American of all sports. So there's nothing that can really frustrate you, where you went through an entire year. If you were a New York fan who rooted for the Jets, the Rangers, and the Knicks, you went through an entire year where you rooted against your team. It's absurd. In soccer, there's nothing to be gained by losing ever. And I think that's going to help. But, I think, listen, Pete, we taught Rich enough today. We teach him something in all of the, that's why I encourage you. I would say this, I would say our slogan could be a Richie. Learn from us. Pete and I will educate you the way we educate Richie. So you go through our library of podcasts, and you too can be a Richie, because you can learn from us. And I think today he learned about the English colonies. He learned a little bit about, economics. You too can be a Richie. Just let Pete and I just listen to us, and we will teach you. You can be a Richie. So Richie, we're glad that we taught you a little something today. But
fought in the English colonies. I remember 1776. I was a key member there. So you two youngins better calm down.
And you could tell by his affection. Listen, and no one loves baseball more than me, but the fact that
except me, obviously.
I don't know about that, dude. I
baseball more than you, but we'll digress. I love that. Oh, well, nobody loves baseball more than you.
Hey, man. Well, whatever. Listen, we don't want to get too into it, but I've literally given my life to the sport and spend pretty much every day on a diamond. I can't say every day. We're in the Northeast. I don't spend the winters on it, but outside of that, I'm on a diamond pretty much every day for these last however many years. So I do. But ultimately, and I'm a guy who, I watch classic games on YouTube. I play the simulations, whatever. I love the game. Listen to our other podcasts. You're going to find out how much I love the game. But the reality is, man, you can tell that Richie's some 80-year-old who refuses to understand that the sport's in trouble. But we've done other podcasts on that. And that just about wraps it up for us, guys. It's time for us to get this time machine back to the future. So wherever, whenever, however you joined us, we thank you. We appreciate it. We had a blast spending time with you. We can't wait for next time. So for Big Pete, for Richie Hero, I'm the Greek. This has been the Sports Pod Time Machine. And until next time, take care, everybody.
Copyright 2021 Yackers Huddle Media Group, Inc., all rights reserved.